Scott, good morning, sir. How are you? First of all, how are you feeling, sir?
I'm doing well. I'm doing much better, thank you.
Well, I'm glad the truck didn't hit you. But we had a good conversation with Ryan Miller the other day and touched on a lot of these same topics, and I was glad in a way that you kind of delayed so we could go over some of the other things. But the number one thing is the recent report on workforce priorities across the state. Looking at everything that we're doing, we're on the track to get there. I think everybody wants to arrive at some place where we're saying we're there, but we may never achieve that. I mean, it's always a moving target, is it not?
Well, it really is, and I think the thing that excites me about what we have put together with our plan we released last week is that we work so closely with Accelerate Mississippi, other organizations, but it was the input of well over close to 500 people in these meetings that we held across the state, these 51 kind of focus group discussion sessions where we sat back and listened to say, okay, what do you see as the issues we need to be focusing on? And, workforce time and time again was the issue. And it was it's where it all starts. And that's where we've got to focus our attention if we're really going to put ourselves in a position to see the economic growth that we need to see and take advantage of all of the things that we have, in front of us right now. And I think that's where we can really kind of see us move forward. So I'm really excited about this. This is kind of a roadmap. As you know, MEC for a number of years has always used some type of vision, blueprint plan that helps us really work on identifying the solutions that we want to focus on. What is it that we want to really what is the next steps in doing this? You go all the way back to 2004 when Blueprint Mississippi was initially released. It was updated in 2011. We had a smaller report that came out of that in 2018 called Endeavor, which was really when we started focusing on the workforce issue. And now with our report that we released last week, which is entitled Securing Mississippi's Future, Vision for Economic Growth, I think we are in position to really start putting all the pieces together to do this. And we're very blessed that, the legislature 2 years ago put together and created the Office of Workforce Development. And Ryan Miller and his team is really stepping it up and putting their plan in place and really starting to move the needle in terms of how we're going to go about doing this.
I agree with you. And first of all, the first year is kind of a feeling out process. But if he's doing this good, this much with his team that he's put together in a feeling out, when he gets to be a veteran of this, but 2 or 3 years behind him, I'd like to see exactly what happens there as far as Accelerate Mississippi. Let's dig in a little bit more so the people will understand this, because I think as many, and I don't know of any other subject we've covered more than workforce development over the years, from the community college aspects to MEC and others. But give me a little bit of an outline of what excites you most about this plan that addresses some of the problems.
Well, I think it's twofold. One is having the creation of the Office of Workforce Development, which was a recommendation from a competitiveness study that MEC, along with the Mississippi Economic Development Council, put together, in I think 2015 is when we really started working toward getting this. And what we saw in Mississippi is we have really quality workforce programs, a lot of them across the state. But in a lot of ways, they had sort of worked in silos. There was never the coordination among them that we needed. So now that we have Accelerate, it's kind of like what you said, just, Accelerate's 8 months into existence at this point. And I explained to someone right off the bat when they were saying, okay, well, what's your strategic plan? What's your strategic plan? I said, listen, they've got to create their strategic plan. There's not a model to follow. This is going to be, they're starting from scratch. But the work that they're doing aligns so much with what we heard from our, business and community leaders from all across the state when we held our meetings. But I think the biggest thing that I think is in front of us is just creating the opportunities for people to understand what pathways exist, primarily for our students who are currently in high school or getting ready to move into the post-secondary education realm, where there's community college, IHL, or even just an industry certification program. This creates that framework of saying, okay, the first thing we have to do is say, look, there are tons of opportunities for jobs that pay very, very well. In many cases, it doesn't require, lengthy education. The cost is not nearly as much, and you can walk out and walk into a job making $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year and really be doing what you like to do. So part of this process is making sure that we put students in a position to understand the pathways, match up their interests, match up their abilities to say, okay, here is where you really can succeed. I think we're going to see a lot of really good results.
I agree with you, and we've been at this a long time. We should have this down. My questions are, and let's just face it, do we have the school districts on board for this? And if we don't, what is it going to take? Because, and I say this, Scott, because we have some generational baggage, luggage to take care of. If you've got grandfathers who've worked their butts off to get their kids in school, and those kids are the first one from maybe immigrants who actually went to college, and then their kids went to college, and all of a sudden their grandkids are not going to go to college, there is this stigma that has to be broken. And the only way to do that is going to be generational. So you've got to make one hell of a sale from school kids and from junior high, middle school, all the way up to senior.
And I'll say this: our report is available on our website, which is MEC.MS, and it's right there. You can click on it and open it. And the first section is kind of an overview of what we learned, and then the kind of the methodology that we used in doing the research. And then we start the discussion of topics on page 8. And the very first topic is the stigma surrounding students who choose not to go to four-year college.
Beautiful.
That was something that really came back time and time and time again. And I want you to understand, that doesn't mean that all pathways are important. What we're trying to say is all pathways need to have an equal value to them. There are certain pathways that require the four-year college degree or the master's or the doctorate for you to be able to do the job that you really want to go do. But there are also pathways that don't require that. And I think we have to make sure that they're equal in value in everything they do. And what we also got to do is kind of redefine the word college. And I was very deliberate about putting four-year college on that stigma that we talked about, because that's kind of what people think about. When you say college, you're not necessarily thinking about going into a career technical program at one of our community colleges that's going to get you into the workforce quickly. When you say college, you think about the 4 years. So we've kind of got to rethink how we talk about post-secondary education.
I agree. I will say something here, and we'll continue to talk about this. If you make a sell to a 17-year-old and you combine the reasons and the opportunities as far as salary with what he or she really wants to do, you've got it. But you've got to make that sale, and a career day once a year ain't going to cut it. Not as bad as we need to influence these people, or at least put before them the multitude of opportunities. We'll talk about that when we return in just a moment with Scott Waller. Well, let me make a connection with that song. It's 4:09. You graduate 2 years later, 4 years later, you don't have $40, $30, $50, $60, $70,000 in student loans. As a matter of fact, over a 4-year period, if you're starting off with $50,000 or $60,000 a year salary, you could afford a nice 409 if you could find one. So just some numbers out there. And that's not the reason to do that, don't get me wrong, but we've never had more opportunities in the state of Mississippi, and God knows I love this state, and I just think that I wish we would stop talking about some of these things and have everybody pull together. And I know it's hard. From your position, it is tough bringing all the entities together.
Well, and I think to your point is, as you were going off of the air, I want to come back to what you're talking about. How do we do that? There's been a very successful program up in the Pull Alliance, the Pontotoc, Union, Lee County area, as a part of the Wellspring in Toyota, where they have created, through the Create Foundation, a career coaches model, and that is really designed to go in and touch base and talk to the students throughout their time that they're starting to think about where they're going to go after high school. And it's not just a single one-day career fair. It's a continuation of following up on those students. And we've seen it expand to a couple of other places across the state now. One of the recommendations that we make in our workforce, education, workforce, and skills training section of this report is how do we expand that career coach option to make sure more and more students have this opportunity? Because at the end of the day, the school counselor cannot be the career coach. There's just not enough time in the day to do all the things that the counselor has to do in terms of making sure that the student is in the right classes, all of the other aspects and job responsibilities. But bringing this career coach in, and what they did up with Create is they're not actually a school employee. They're an employee of Create. So, I mean, they go into the schools. You know, it's a partnership. The schools agree. They help decide who's coming in and all of that. But it's a partnership that allows that person to really be that career coach and not have to be worried about being tugged to go, watch the bus line or tugged to go sit in a class when the teacher doesn't show up. So, I mean, you've got all of that I think is an important part of it. So that's actually in one of the pieces of legislation that's been introduced this year. So that's really a step in the right direction. I think we're starting to see a real emphasis on kind of assessing and evaluating the programs that are out there to, one, make sure, particularly at the K-12 level, they're giving the type of training that puts students in position to either enter the workforce or move on to the next level education, which would primarily be at the community colleges, so that they're not starting from scratch when they get there. I mean, all of those things are so important, and I think it's really I'm excited about the synergy that's existing right now in this area that we really have an opportunity to be successful.
Let me mirror that thought, because when we were in the Golden Triangle at the airport and they had that career date thing and all of the different entities around there, the different businesses, industries, all were showing their wares and everything, and they had the 8th grade students. I think it was specifically for the 8th grade students. I mean, and literally hundreds and hundreds of students came in, and I thought, man, that's what these kids need to see. They need to see it firsthand. They need to ask questions about it, and I thought it was great. The other
can I just
source,
can I say this real quick?
Sure.
That's the pathway to possibilities. The imagine the possibilities that they're doing. Those are tremendous. Those are they're very important part of this process. But I think we need to, as you say, be able to continue that discussion well beyond the day or 2 days that those are taking place.
I remember the conversation we had. We had a remote on the coast at Ingalls, and it's been quite a while ago, but I was blown away by that. And I thought, what a wonderful opportunity, because they had some students who had graduated a couple of years, and those students were making at Ingalls $60,000 to $65,000. This has been many years ago. I have no idea what he is making at this particular time. But I asked him, had him on the air, and it was kind of funny because I asked him exactly how he got into this. He said that's something he wanted to do, and I'm not sure exactly what he was doing at Ingalls at that time. But he was a nice young guy. And I said, what does it mean to you? He said, well, he just bought a car. I said, really? What was it? He said, I bought a Corvette. I said, you bought a Corvette? How long have you been out? He said, about a year. And he bought a Corvette. I'm not sure if it was a new Corvette or whatever, but I said, well, you must be doing pretty good. He said, yeah, I'm okay. I said, well, here you are with a Corvette and living on your own. He said, well, I'm still living with Mom and Dad. So I thought, okay, this guy's pretty sharp. But it just gives you an idea where when you have peers coming into the classroom who've been there recently, a year or two, I think that's a powerful force for these kids, these students.
Well, without question, it is, and I think that's and that comes back of trying to make sure we're finding that right pathway, because these are kids who like what they're doing. It gives them an opportunity to use their talents. By the same token, we need to make sure that we're understanding what other kids want to do and the importance of those other degrees that are at our universities and so forth. So, I mean, it really goes back to helping give them an understanding in a much earlier age of what exists and what possibilities are there for them to really be successful in life.
Scott, do the universities look at this as with some resistance?
I don't think so. And the reason I say that is I've had conversations with a lot of those. And because, I think the shift now is that all education has to focus as being workforce. And I think that's the whole – it's all about whether we're training someone to be an engineer, which we need a lot of those. Yeah. At the end of the day, are the programs matching the needs of the employer? That's really where it matches. So are our engineering programs across the state producing the types of engineers that our companies in Mississippi need? Are the accounting programs producing the type of accountants that our firms need in the state so that they can be ready to walk in and be successful? And I think that's where I'm seeing more focus. So I don't think there's I won't call it resistance as much as I think we've got to look at it holistically, and that's what I try to point out in the report is all of these pathways are very valuable. To focus on one or the other is the incorrect way of doing it. We've got to focus on them all if we're going to be successful.
Maybe one of the ways to bridge that sensitivity as far as a college degree is this, and I've always said this, when you have an enterprising and entrepreneurial young man or woman who gets into this and finds something they like to do, whether it's data coding to construction, and you go into that business full-fledged, and you're trained for that, there's nothing that precludes you from or negates you from getting the college degree later on to open your own business if you want a better financial background, business background, or whatever it happens to be. More now than ever with everything available to you online or on campus. The possibilities are still open.
That's what's so great about this. And I actually was having a conversation with the university president this past weekend about a program that has been started. And really, prior to this program, this, the applied sciences degree that now that IHL passed a few years ago, and Mississippi State was one of the first to put it in. I think others are kind of following suit on that. But the idea was prior to this program, a lot of the hours that a student may get in a career technical program did not count toward a 4-year college degree, a bachelor's degree. Under this particular program, they walk in, once they finish this at the community college level, they walk in with about 60 hours of credit toward a full-fledged bachelor's degree. So to that student that you were just mentioning, okay, I've finished my program, I've gotten in the workforce, I'm doing well, I want to expand my knowledge. I want to move on to the next step. Well, they now have that opportunity without having to start completely over. And I think that's where the universities have really started to kind of step up and move into this in a much more aggressive way in being successful. And honestly, that program has been extremely successful in allowing people to move on to the next level.
Lemons to lemonade, even on the college level, and I agree with that. Are there any bill numbers, House and Senate is still alive, that we need to be watching that applies to this conversation?
Well, I think there is, and I may have the bill wrong, but I think it's 1388 is a House bill that actually focuses on a couple of things I talked earlier: the career coaches, the other aspect of how do we make sure we're evaluating these programs in a way and giving students the opportunity to look at career readiness, which is something that I think is extremely important and something that we've actually worked on for a number of years.
And I think all of that will be in full display as we get closer and closer to making and building the first electric car. In the state of
I think so. And on the Senate side, there's legislation to kind of really make sure we're utilizing the dollars in the best way possible when it comes to workforce.
You got it. Scott, as always, sir, thank you for being so informative, and it was good to see you. And our next event is coming up when?
It's next Thursday, Paul. It's a week away. It's
I'm going to be there 3rd. And not be there, is my understanding.
Yeah,
we're still working it out.
You'll be with us, but you'll be like we are right now. But we just appreciate all that SuperTalk does to help promote these events.